Позбивались тут в стае. Ну, точно звери, по цвету шкуры. Одни как разбойничали, так и разбойничают. Другие то ли нас от зоны, то ли зону от нас охраняют. Солдаты, блин, тоже.
As was mentioned before, having friends in the zone is often the difference between life and death. Only through a coordinated effort of many does it become possible to fight off beasts, anomalies, and other stalkers. Complementing this is the fact that for most people, the very existence of a unifying narrative generates the capacity for action. Faced with a multitude of questions and uncertainties, a person often remains stuck in place, incapable of taking any action for fear of making the wrong move and suffering its consequences. Conversely, armed with more or less complex explanations that allow him to understand, following Dr. Pillman's previously described interpretation, and integrated into a broad network of like-minded individuals, a person evolves into an agent of action, finding intellectual support and moral comfort in the collective he is a part of. Open questions thus become subject to simple categorizations or moral judgments, resulting in a significant conservation of energy that would otherwise be expended. This should not be understood as a eulogy to an ideological worldview or conformity of thought, far from it. It simply speaks to the relationship between efficiency and the coordination of individual actions. In conditions of open debate and continuous questioning, decision-making and action slow down, consuming vast amounts of time, often unacceptably much from the perspective of the set objectives. It would therefore be foolish to expect such deliberation within military-type organizational units. However, factional divisions within the zone are not solely tied to survival and combat, but also extend to interpretations of its origin and nature, as well as the organization of life and interpersonal relationships within it. Here, things become radically more complicated, and efficiency comes at the expense of truth. This is directly linked to the previously mentioned problem of distinction. The necessity of translating knowledge into action implies a shift from the slow and arduous process of questioning, researching, revisiting initial assumptions, and considering alternative perspectives, to swift decision-making, shortcutting the process and relying on simplified mental maps where each element has its fixed role, leaving no room for complexity of the world, especially not when a finger is on the trigger. Different approaches to distinguishing discrete units within a complex system and interpreting their relationships evolve through the demand for action aligned with these interpretations, as well as the moral and value judgments that accompany most human activities, into the formation of distinct operational units, in this case clans. In this way, the process of dissecting reality comes back like a boomerang, leading to the dissection and fragmentation of human efforts. On the other hand, belonging not only provides a sense of security against external threats, but also gives meaning. Maps of meaning make everything comprehensible, while truth is validated by the existence of others who believe the same thing, which in turn serves as the foundation from which meaning is drawn. When framed this way, it indeed seems foolish, yet what applies to children applies to adults as well, albeit in a different form and with far more dire consequences. In this manner, the mechanism of verification is displaced from empirical reality and transferred into the realm of the intersubjective, while the refuge from the scorching gaze that demands accountability is found in the crowd of the like-minded. Many find precisely such behavior to be a source of peace of mind. However, as already mentioned, there is no escape from self-examination and alienation. Both are inevitable consequences of intellect and self-awareness. Thus, just like the previously mentioned grandiose terms such as freedom or duty, clan belonging, viewed in the abstract, does not surpass the role of a fragile shield against the abyss of the universe. And yet, the allure of the zone remains irresistible to many. Fantasies of wealth, freedom, knowledge, or duty that will be forged through interaction with it and within it exert their intoxicating effect, calling forth new seekers again and again. The yearning for meaning through the fulfillment of desires far from the supposedly corrupt or unjust everyday world burns intensely. In contrast to the dull gazes of exhausted workers on their way home, in contrast to state control and surveillance, in contrast to a meaningless life devoid of obligations, in contrast to pseudo-research work framed by templates of prejudice, fear, and academic bureaucracy, In contrast to all this stands the virgin expanse of the zone onto which we project our fantasies and dreams. Notice also the use of color in the movie Stalker. Only after breaking through the cordon do the scenes take on a natural palette, while the frames depicting the world they came from are dominated by brown, yellow, and gray. Symbolically, this contrast testifies to the depression, lifelessness, and despair of a reality drained of meaning and hope. Much like in the game, the potential of the other world, no matter how little it may be, restores the magic of existence. Still, as the wise stalker from the beginning of this chapter observes, birds of feather flock together, and thus we must illuminate the tragedy of a rather widespread belief. Namely, in conversations with people we often hear remarks about the questionable nature of the society they are a part of. I assume we have all pondered injustices, corruption, the meaning of fighting against them, or ways in which the situation might be corrected. Yet, I doubt we have considered these questions in every decision we made, or asked ourselves how our own actions may contribute to the negative outcomes. While this could be interpreted as a lack of awareness regarding personal responsibility, I would argue that a broader phenomenon is at play. As social reality becomes increasingly complex at a rapid pace, many people experience a growing sense that their own lives are not in their hands, let alone that they have any influence over broader social developments. And yet, contrary to the idea that society is an inherently evil construct separated from us and our intentions, there is a reason why all the ideals we have ever invented ultimately become distorted. For this very reason, an escape into the idealized zone of possibilities merely recreates the same world of death, hunger, meaninglessness, and division as the one we fled from, if not something worse. Every society is a consequence of the sum of our choices, limited perceptions, prejudices, nature, weaknesses, and strengths, rather than the result of some mystical hidden forces. It is true that sea consciousness shapes the ecological environment hidden from the view of most, but it is equally true that the atrocities, looting, armed conflicts, drunkenness, and mistreatment of subordinates are all products of the social relations created by the stalkers themselves. The zone is neither merely evil nor merely an opportunity, it is our creation. Not only as the tragedy of an ill-fated intrusion into the Noosphere, but also as the world of social formations that inhabit it. And those shadowy players that make up sea consciousness are nothing more than people of great ideals, which is why we must never forget the capacity for evil, whether conscious or unconscious, that lurks within each of us, and which no lack of awareness can ever truly justify. At this point, we can draw another parallel to the film, shedding light on the phenomenon in question. Around 1 hour and 2 minutes in, the guide begins his speech about the zone, trying to comprehend what is happening and convey his own insights to others. Reflecting on its seemingly capricious nature, explaining the shifting anomalies and the emergence of new challenges, he concludes that everything that happens depends on the people themselves. The human mind, in fact, functions as a catalyst for anomalies, or rather traps. Through their own thoughts, stalkers place obstacles in their path, not only for themselves but for others as well, and this can be seen as a metaphor for the journey through life, the search for meaning and fulfillment. After all, the protagonists remain outside the room for a reason, grappling with their own thoughts, afraid that this version of the wish granter might reveal the truth about their true nature, a truth that could be, at the very least, unsettling. And from the same perspective, we can justifiably ask, how could we possibly create a perfect world free of evil, confusion, and suffering when these things live within us, poisoning our thoughts and souls? Death is a natural phenomenon, but omnipresent death and destruction in this case are the consequence of our choices, frustrations, divisions, and malice. This is a perspective that the members of sea consciousness have not taken into account, but neither have individual clans for that matter. Both groups see themselves as exempt from these truths as exceptional. But let us return to the question of faith and meaning, one of the three themes mentioned at the beginning. As stated, the ever-present void or sense of alienation, manifesting with varying intensity and frequency, can be partially alleviated through belonging. When unable to find fulfillment through our own intellectual and active capacities, we seek a supposed cure for this affliction in the existence of a group that carries faith. It acts as a link bridging the gap between the individual and the universe. The individual thus dissolves into an abstract collective body, drawing meaning from the narrative shared by the group, from rituals marking significant moments, and from a plan and coordinated action that partially embodies the group's unified intellectual and active capacities. This is perfectly aligned with the evolutionary path of our species, which embarked on the struggle for survival and expansion collectively, not only in terms of pack organization for survival. We clearly see this path in 2001: A Space Odyssey through the primates' interaction with the monolith. The blackness of this object, as noted, offers no information and easily fades into the cosmic abyss, yet the collective movement around it, the cautious probing and cries, are a primitive manifestation of synchronized action in the discovery of meaning, the creation of narrative and ritual, everything that makes us human. Thus, the monolith becomes part of the transcendent, the celestial, or the divine, something that belongs to us as a group. This marks the first stage in the developmental journey in seeking meaning and truth. A look at the physical manifestation of the supposedly divine, and an interpretation of its nature and how to please it, represents the starting point on the path of cognition. Meaning is perceived. However, at this point, the logic of knowledge is reversed. Information does not flow from the object of interest to the researcher, that is, the object is not understood as it is, but rather from the researcher to the object, which is to say that the meaning is projected onto it. One manifestation of this process, which can serve as a litmus test in our reality, is the use of value-laden terms in the categorization of observed phenomena. Thus, descriptions of these phenomena abound with words such as good or evil, and parts of the clan's narratives about the zone are constructed in this way.